Have you ever sat alone at 2 a.m., feeling like your English is broken because your heart is broken first? I did. In a small American diner, with a cold pancake and zero motivation to keep learning. But what if I told you that same heartbreak taught me more English than any textbook ever could? This is my real story, from lonely immigrant to a happy marriage, 2 kids, and pancakes that accidentally cured everything. The 2 a.m. question. Imagine this. It's 2 in the morning. Not the fun kind of 2 in the morning, like after a party. No. It's the heavy, lonely, why is my life falling apart kind of 2 in the morning. You're sitting in a 24-hour diner somewhere in the United States. The fluorescent lights are buzzing like angry bees. The coffee tastes like someone rinsed a dirty sock in hot water. And in front of you sits a plate of pancakes. Not fancy pancakes. Just flour, eggs, milk, and a tiny pool of fake maple syrup that looks too yellow to be real. You're not hungry. You haven't been hungry for weeks. But you ordered them anyway because the waitress asked, "What can I get you, honey?" and you panicked. Your English froze. The only word that came out was pancakes. So here they are. Cooling down. Getting sadder by the minute, just like you. That was me. 6 years ago. New to America. Fresh off a divorce that felt less like a breakup and more like a car crash in slow motion. I had moved to the U.S. for love, the stupid, reckless, I'll-follow-you-anywhere kind of love. And then that love exploded. Not dramatically, with screaming and broken plates. It just faded. Like old wallpaper. One day I looked at him across the dinner table, and he looked like a stranger. And he looked at me the same way. So I left. I packed 2 suitcases, my terrible English, and a heart that felt like a crumpled paper ball. I had no family here. No friends. Just a small apartment near a highway and a diner that never closed. That diner became my church. My therapist. My accidental classroom. Here's the thing about American diners at 2 a.m. They're full of people who are also falling apart, but quietly. There's the truck driver who hasn't seen his kids in 3 months. The college student crying over a failed exam. The old man who talks to his dead wife's photo. And then there's me, staring at pancakes like they owe me money. But something strange happened that first night. I asked myself a question. A stupid question. The kind of question you only ask when you're too tired to lie to yourself anymore. I looked at that cold, rubbery pancake and thought, what if this fixes me? Not the pancake itself. But the act of sitting here. Of showing up. Of ordering food in a language I barely spoke, in a country where I had nobody. Your brain hates uncertainty. That's not me being poetic, that's neuroscience. When you go through a major loss, like divorce or heartbreak, your brain's anterior cingulate cortex, the part that detects errors and conflicts, goes into overdrive. It keeps scanning for what went wrong, like a broken alarm system. That's why you can't sleep. That's why you replay the same arguments in your head at 2 a.m. Your brain is literally stuck in a loop, trying to solve a problem that has no solution. But here's the trick I learned that night, sitting in that ugly yellow booth. You can't solve the big problem. You can only change the channel. And ordering pancakes in broken English? That was me changing the channel. Not because I was brave. Because I was too tired to be scared anymore. I looked at the waitress, a middle-aged woman named Rosa with tired eyes and a kind smile, and I said, "More syrup? Please?" 3 words. 3 broken, awkward, accent-heavy words. And Rosa didn't laugh. She didn't correct me. She just poured more syrup on my cold pancake and said, "You okay, sweetie?" I wasn't okay. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. That's the secret nobody tells you about learning English when you're heartbroken. You stop caring about being perfect. You stop caring about grammar. You stop caring about sounding stupid. Because honestly, your heart already feels stupider than any sentence you could ever mispronounce. And that brokenness? That's actually your superpower. When you have nothing left to lose, you stop freezing. You start trying. You start speaking. So no, pancakes don't cure heartbreak. But showing up at a diner at 2 a.m., ordering food with a trembling voice, and letting a stranger call you sweetie, that's a start. That's the first tiny, ridiculous, messy step toward something new. And that's exactly where my real English journey began. Not with a textbook. Not with an app. But with a plate of pancakes and a question that sounded crazy but turned out to be the smartest thing I ever asked. What if I stop trying to fix my past and start ordering my future, one word at a time? Stranger in my own life. Let me tell you something embarrassing. When I first moved to the United States, I didn't know how to order a sandwich. Not because I was stupid. Because I was terrified. Every time someone looked at me, my brain would erase every English word I had ever learned. Poof. Gone. Like someone pulled a plug. I would stand there, mouth open, making sounds that weren't quite words, while the person behind the counter smiled patiently, or impatiently, and I just wanted to disappear into the floor. That's the thing nobody warned you about immigration. It's not the paperwork. It's not the visa problems. It's the quiet, daily humiliation of feeling like a toddler in an adult body. You can't read TH. labels in the grocery store. You don't know which toothpaste is which. You accidentally buy salted caramel ice cream when you wanted vanilla because the font was too fancy. Small things. But small t. Things, when they happen 20 times a day, become a big, heavy blanket of shame. And on top of that blanket? A broken marriage. Or in my case, a marriage that had already broken, and I was just living inside the ruins like a squatter. I had come to America for him. Let's call him Mark, because that's not his real name, but honestly, he was such a Mark. You know the type. Charming. Confident. The kind of guy who ordered for you at restaurants because he knew what you'd like. At first, that felt romantic. Later, it felt like a cage. We met when he was traveling abroad. I was young. I was stupid. I was dazzled by his American accent and his easy laughter. He said, "Come to the States with me. We'll have an adventure." And I said yes. Because that's what people in movies do, right? Except real life isn't a movie. Real life is fighting about money. Real life is realizing that someone who was fun on vacation is exhausting to live with. Real life is sitting in an apartment in Ohio, yes, Ohio, watching snow fall outside and wondering how you ended up here, 6,000 miles from your mother, from your friends, from every single thing that ever felt safe. The divorce wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Too quiet. One night we were eating dinner, frozen pizza, because we had stopped cooking for each other months ago, and he said, "I don't think this is war, King." And I said, "Okay." That was it. No yelling. No crying. Just two strangers chewing cardboard pizza, ending a marriage like they were ending a subscription service. But here's what I didn't expect. After he moved out, I felt nothing. And that nothing was worse than sadness. Sadness at least feels like something. This was just empty. I would wake up at 3 p.m. I would watch TV shows I didn't care about. I would order takeout from the same Chinese restaurant every night because the lady on the phone could tell it was me from my accent and she was always nice abo. It. I became a ghost in my own life. And the worst part? My English got worse. Not better. Worse. Because when you're isolated and depressed, your brain literally shrinks the language centers. There's REA. Science behind this. When you experience chronic stress or loneliness, your hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory and learning, actually decreases in volume. It's not just in your head. It's in your biology. Your brain is conserving energy because it thinks you're in danger. And language learning? That's not a survival priority when your brain thinks you're being hunted by an emotional saber-toothed tiger. So there I was. Alone. Depressed. And unable to speak the only language this country understood. I stopped going outside. Why bother? Every trip to the store was a small war. Every conversation was a reminder of what I'd lost. Not just Mark. My confidence. My identity. The person I used to be, He funny one, the chatty one, the one who could talk for hours, she was gone. Replaced by someone who nodded and smiled and said thank you too many times because she didn't know what else to say. Do you know what that feels like? To be a stranger in your own life? It feels like wearing shoes that don't fit. Every step hurts a little. Not enough to stop walking. But enough that you're always of the pain. You wake up in the morning and you think, whose bedroom is this? You look in the mirror and you think, who is that tired person? You open your mouth and you think, why can't I just say? Why would I mean? I spent 3 months like that. 3 months of fading. 3 months of telling myself I should just go back home. Back to my country. Back to my language. Back to a version of myself that made sense. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. You can't stay there forever. Eventually, you get hungry. And not emotionally hungry. Actually hungry. Like, stomach growling, fridge is empty, I haven. Eaten in 2 days hungry. That's what drove me to the diner that first night. Not courage. Not hope. Just biology. Just the basic, animal need to put something in my stomach before my body gave up tea. Oh. I walked 6 blocks in the freezing cold. It was 1:47 a.m. The diner's sign was flickering, eat, half the letters were dead. I pushed open the door. A bell jingled. The smell of old coffee and tobacco. And wrapped around me like a hug I didn't know I needed. And that's when I saw Rosa. The waitress with the kind eyes. She didn't ask me why I looked like a drowned cat. She didn't ask me where I was from or why my English was so broken. She just handed me a menu and said, take your time, honey. For the first time in months, someone wasn't rushing me. Someone wasn't expecting me to perform. Someone was just letting me be. I stared at the menu for a long time. Longer than a normal person. Because I wasn't reading the words. I was realizing something. I was realizing that I had a choice. I could keep fading. I could keep Being a ghost. Or I could order a stupid pancake and see what happened next. So I ordered the pancake. And that tiny, ridiculous decision, that's where my real story begins. The diner that never sleeps. Here's a weird fact about American diners. They never close. Not for holidays. Not for blizzards. Not for the end of the world. Somewhere in the fine print of the U.S. Constitution, I swear it says, "Thou shalt always have a place to buy coffee and regret your life choices at 3 a.m. That place is the diner. The one I stumbled into was called the Iron Skillet. Which is a terrible name for a restaurant, honestly. It sounds like something you'd name a medieval weapon. But it had vinyl booths the color of a bruised banana, a jukebox that only played songs from the 80s. And a permanent smell of bacon grease and desperation. I loved it immediately. Not because it was nice. Because it was honest. Fancy restaurants lie to you. They have soft lighting and tiny portions and waiters who pretend to be your friend. The Iron Skillet had none of that. The coffee was weak. The pancakes were the size of car tires. And Rosa, the waitress, would yell order up so loud that the truckers in the back would flinch. No pretense. No performance. Just food and silence and the quiet understanding that everyone in here was nursing some kind of wound. That's the secret of the 2 a.m. diner. It's not a restaurant. It's a support group without the awkward introductions. The truck driver with the red cap? His wife left him 6 months ago. The teenage girl in the corner booth? She just failed her driving test for the 3rd time. The old man who orders the same grilled cheese every night. His son stopped calling. Nobody says these things out loud. You don't have to. You just look at their faces, at the way they hold their coffee cups, and you know. And me? I was the woman who ordered pancakes every single night and never finished them. Rosa stopped asking if I wanted anything else after the first week. She just poured the coffee, dropped the plate, and said, "You'll eat when you're ready, honey." I wasn't ready. Not for a long time. But here's what happened during those nights. Little by little, I started noticing things. Not big things. Small, ridiculous things. Like how the sugar packets had little riddles printed on them. Like how the salt shaker was always sticky. Like how the same 3 people showed up at the same times every night, and we all pretended not to notice each other, but we definitely noticed. There was a man I called the professor because he always wore a tweed jacket and read old newspapers. He never spoke to anyone. He just sat, read, drank black coffee, and left exactly at 4 a.m. There was a couple who came in at 2:30 a.m. every Friday, both still in their work uniforms. And they would share a slice of apple pie without saying a word. Married 20 years, Rosa told me once. Still in love. You can tell by how they don't need to talk. And then there was Leo. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me stay in this part of the story a little longer. Because the diner itself, the place, not the people, taught me something important about learning English. And about healing. And about why you shouldn't give up when every cell in your body is screaming at you to quit. Here's the science part, because I know you like that. Your brain has something called neuroplasticity. Fancy word. Simple meaning, your brain can rewire itself. But here's the catch. Neuroplasticity doesn't happen when you're comfortable. It happens when you're in a new environment. When you're slightly stressed. When things are unfamiliar. That's why moving to a new country is so exhausting, but also why it's so transformative. Your brain is forced to build new pathways just to survive. The diner was my new environment. Every night, I sat in that same booth. Every night, I heard the same sounds, the hiss of the coffee machine, the clatter of plates, the mumble of sleepy conversations. But slowly, without realizing it, my brain started relaxing. The hypervigilance faded. The constant alertness, is someone judging me? Did I say that wrong? Do I look weird? It started to quiet down. And when your nervous system calms down, something magical happens. You start hearing language differently. Not as a threat. Not as a test. Just as sound. As rhythm. As patterns. I began to notice how Rosa talked. She had this habit of saying "hon" at the end of every sentence. What'll it be, hon? More coffee, hon? You take care now, hon. It was small. But it was a pattern. And my brain, starved for patterns after months of chaos, latched onto it. Then I started noticing the menu. Not just the words, the structure. Bacon and eggs, comes with toast and hash browns. Pancakes, add blueberries for extra. Soup of the day, ask your server. Simple sentences. Repeatable formulas. I started muttering them to myself in the bathroom mirror. Not because I was studying. Because they were comforting. Like a song you can't get out of your head. This is how real language learning happens, by the way. Not through flashcards. Not through grammar drills. Through exposure. Through hearing the same phrases over and over until they stop being foreign and start being familiar. Scientists call it statistical learning. Your brain is basically a prediction machine. It hears "how are you?" enough times, and it learns that the next word is almost always fine or good or tired. It doesn't need a textbook. It needs repetition. It needs a diner that never closes. So night after night, I showed up. Not because I was disciplined. Because I had nowhere else to go. My apartment felt like a tomb. The diner felt like a waiting room. And waiting rooms, as depressing as they are, at least have other people in them. Other people who are also waiting. For something. For anything. One night, about 3 weeks into my diner routine, Rosa sat down across from me. She never did that. She was always working, always moving. But that night, she slid into the booth with a cup of coffee for herself and looked at me with those tired, knowing eyes. You gonna eat them pancakes someday, or just stare at 'em? She asked. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in months. It came out weird, rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened. But it was a laugh. Maybe tomorrow, I said. She nodded. Tomorrow's good. Tomorrow's always good. And then she got up and went back to work. But something had shifted. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was a regular. I was part of the 2 a.m. club. And that tiny belonging, that tiny thread connecting me to another human being, was enough to keep me coming back. The diner never sleeps. And neither, it turns out, does hope. It just hides for a while. Usually behind a sticky menu and a plate of cold pancakes. Pancakes and silent tears. Let me describe that first plate of pancakes to you in detail. Because I remember every single thing about it. Even now, years later, I could draw it from memory. The plate was white but cracked on one edge. The pancakes were stacked 3 high, slightly burned on the bottom, swimming in a puddle of melted butter that had turned into a yellow lake. The syrup came in a small plastic pitcher shaped like a maple leaf, which is hilarious because real maple syrup has never touched that pitcher. It was corn syrup. Artificial color. Artificial flavor. The kind of sweet that coats your teeth and makes you feel slightly dirty. And I sat there, staring at this plate, and I couldn't eat. Not because the food was bad. Because my body had forgotten how to swallow. That's a real thing, by the way. When you're in a deep depression, your autonomic nervous system goes haywire. The part of your brain that controls basic functions, swallowing, blinking, breathing, it gets confused. It's like someone unplugged the remote and put the batteries in backward. You have to consciously think about every tiny movement. Lift the fork. Aim for the pancake. Pierce it. Bring it to your mouth. Open. Chew. Swallow. I couldn't do it. I tried. I really tried. My hand shook. The fork hovered over the top pancake like a helicopter trying to land in a storm. And then, without warning, my eyes started burning. Not the slow, dramatic build-up you see in movies. The fast, humiliating, I can't control this kind of tears. They just fell. Right onto the pancakes. Drop after drop after drop. I looked around, panicked. Was anyone watching? The truck driver was reading a newspaper. The couple in the corner was arguing softly about something. Rosa was behind the counter, wiping down the coffee machine. Nobody was looking. Nobody cared. I was crying in public, and the world didn't stop. The jukebox kept playing. The coffee machine kept hissing. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer went off and someone yelled, "Order up." That's when I realized something important. Nobody is watching you as much as you think they are. Seriously. It's called the spotlight effect in psychology. It's the tendency to believe that everyone is paying attention to you, your mistakes, your tears, your broken English. But they're not. They're worried about their own lives. Their own problems. Their own cold coffee. So I let myself cry. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, into that plate of pancakes, while the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the smell of bacon wrapped around me like a blanket. I cried for the marriage that died. I cried for the person I used to be before I moved here. I cried because I was tired, not sleepy tired, but soul tired, the kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. And then, after about 5 minutes, the tears stopped. Not because I felt better. Because there were no tears left. My eyes were dry. My nose was running. My pancakes were soggy with salt water and syrup. And I looked down at that mess and I thought, this is the ugliest, saddest meal anyone has ever not eaten. But here's the weird part. I didn't leave. I stayed. I stayed and I drank the cold coffee. I stayed and I watched the truck driver fold his newspaper and leave a $2 tip. I stayed and I watched Rosa refill the sugar containers one by one. I stayed until the sky outside started turning from black to dark blue to gray. The first hint of sunrise. 5:47 a.m. according to the clock above the kitchen door. I had survived the night. Not heroically. Not gracefully. But I had survived. When I finally stood up to leave, my legs were wobbly. My head was foggy. My shirt had a syrup stain on the sleeve that I wouldn't notice until I got home. Rosa came over with the check. $2.75. She looked at my plate, 3 uneaten pancakes swimming in salty syrup, and she didn't say a word. She just tore the check out of her little notebook, placed it face down on the table, and said, "Same time tomorrow, hon?" I nodded. I didn't know if I meant it. But I nodded. Walking home that morning was strange. The streets were empty except for a few joggers and a garbage truck. The air was cold and clean. Everything felt unreal, like I was walking through a movie set. I kept replaying the night in my head. The tears. The pancakes. The way Rosa said, "Same time tomorrow," like it was the most normal thing in the world. And that's when I understood something. The diner wasn't just a place to eat. It was a place to fall apart safely. A place where you could cry into your breakfast and nobody called an ambulance or asked invasive questions. A place where the worst thing that could happen was cold coffee and a sticky menu. In America, people talk a lot about the pursuit of happiness. It's in the Declaration of Independence. But nobody tells you that sometimes happiness is not the goal. Sometimes the goal is just to make it through the night. To put one foot in front of the other. To show up at a diner at 2 a.m. and order pancakes you won't eat, just to prove to yourself that you're still alive. I walked into my apartment at 6:15 a.m. The sun was fully up now, orange and pink and ridiculous. My bed was still unmade from yesterday. Dishes in the sink. Clothes on the floor. A mess. I was a mess. But for the first time in months, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt tired. Real tired. The kind of tired that comes from crying and walking and existing. I fell asleep within minutes. No dreams. No nightmares. Just black, silent, merciful nothing. When I woke up, it was 2 p.m. The sun was already starting to lower in the winter sky. I looked at the clock. I looked at the ceiling. And then I looked at my phone, where I had written down the diner's hours from the menu, open 24 hours. Every day. No exceptions. I didn't decide to go back that night. It wasn't a decision. It was more like gravity. Like my body knew where it needed to be, even if my brain was still confused. So I showered. I put on the same sweater from last night because the rest of my clothes were dirty. I walked 6 blocks in the freezing cold. I pushed open the door. The bell jingled. Rosa looked up from behind the counter and smiled. "Pancakes?" she asked. "Pancakes," I said. And that was the second night. And the third. And the 10th. And the 30th. Each time, the pancakes got a little less sad. Each time, the tears came a little later, or not at all. Each time, I stayed a little longer, drank a little more coffee, and let the diner's strange, broken rhythm become my own. The waitress who spoke without words. Let me tell you about Rosa. Because Rosa saved my life. Not with CPR or a defibrillator. With coffee. With patience. With the kind of silence that says, "I see you, and I'm not going anywhere." Rosa was in her 50s. Maybe 60s. It was hard to tell because she had that weathered, been through something face that could be any age between 40 and 70. She was short, round, with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail so tight it looked like it was fighting her. She wore the same uniform every night, a pale blue polo shirt with the iron skillet embroidered over the heart, black pants. Non-slip shoes that squeaked on the linoleum. And she moved like a dancer. Not a ballet dancer. A boxer. Efficient. Economical. Every step had a purpose. She was from Guatemala. Came to the US in the 90s. Worked 3 jobs for 10 years to send money back home. Raised 2 kids who were now in college. Her English was perfect, but accented. The kind of accent that Americans call thick but really just means I know more languages than you. She could switch between Spanish and English without thinking, sometimes in the middle of a sentence. You want more coffee, mija? Mija. Spanish for my daughter. She called everyone that. Even the old truckers. I didn't know any of this on the first night, of course. I just knew that she didn't rush me. That she didn't correct my grammar. That when I pointed at the menu instead of saying the words, she just nodded and said, "Good choice, hon." But here's where it gets interesting. About 2 weeks into my pancake routine, Rosa did something unexpected. She sat down across from me. Not during a break, she never took breaks. She just slid into the booth, coffee pot in hand, and refilled my mug even though it was already full. "You're not from here," she said. Not a question. I shook my head. "Me neither," she said. Took me 5 years to feel like I belonged. 5 years of crying into my soup. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. Which was fine, because Rosa didn't need me to talk. She just kept going. My first job in this country was cleaning hotel rooms. I didn't speak a word of English. Not one word. A guest once asked me for extra towels, and I handed him a toilet brush. She laughed. A deep, smoker's laugh. He was not happy. But you know what? I didn't die. The world didn't end. I just learned the word towels and never forgot it. That's when I realized something. Rosa wasn't just being nice. She was teaching me. Not with flashcards or grammar rules. With stories. With her own shame. With her own survival. There's actual science behind this. When you learn a language through emotional connection, through someone who shares your struggle, your brain releases oxytocin. That's the bonding hormone. The same one that floods your system when you hug someone or pet a dog. Oxytocin lowers your stress response. It quiets the amygdala, that little alarm system in your brain that screams danger, every time you hear an unfamiliar sound. And when your amygdala shuts up, you can actually hear. You can actually remember. That's why Rosa was a better teacher than any app. Because she didn't judge me. She had been me. 25 years ago, in a different diner, with a different accent, crying into a different plate of food. After that night, Rosa started talking to me more. Not constantly, she had a job to do. But whenever she had a quiet moment, she'd slide into the booth and tell me something. A story about her first winter in Chicago, when she didn't own a coat. About the time she accidentally called her boss mama and wanted to die. About the customer who taught her the phrase piece of cake and how she thought it meant actual cake for 3 months. And I started talking back. Not much. A word here. A sentence there. Broken. Slow. Full of pauses while I searched for words that weren't there. But Rosa never finished my sentences. She never jumped in with the correct word. She just waited. Patient as a stone. Letting me find my own way. That's rare, you know. Most people can't stand silence. They fill it with corrections, with suggestions, with what you're trying to say is. But Rosa understood something that most language teachers don't. Fluency isn't speed. Fluency is the confidence to be slow. One night, about 6 weeks in, I finally ate the pancakes. Not all of them. Half of one. But I chewed. I swallowed. And Rosa, watching from behind the counter, gave me a thumbs up like I'd just run a marathon. "See," she said later. "Your stomach didn't explode. Your heart didn't stop. You're still here." "I'm still here," I repeated. 3 words. But they were the truest words I'd said in months. Here's what I learned from Rosa. Language is not about vocabulary. It's about connection. You can know 10,000 words and still feel alone if no one listens. Or you can know 10 words and feel seen if someone hears them. She also taught me something about American culture that no textbook could. Americans, she said, are weird about time. They're always rushing. Always checking their watches. Always saying let's grab coffee sometime when they don't mean it. But the ones who matter, the real ones, they're the ones who will sit with you at 2 a.m. while you cry into a pancake. They're the ones who won't ask for anything back. Rosa never asked me why I was sad. She never asked about my ex-husband or my family or my visa status. She just poured coffee and told stories and let me be. And somehow, in that space of being allowed to be broken, I started to heal. Not because of anything she said. Because of everything she didn't say. The human brain is wired for mirroring. When someone is calm, you become calmer. When someone is patient, you become more patient. Rosa's nervous system was like an anchor in a storm. I just had to hold on. By the end of the 2nd month, I had learned more English from Rosa than from any class. I learned how to say, "Can I have the check, please?" without panicking. I learned how to say, "I'm fine, thank you," even when I wasn't. I learned how to say, "Same time tomorrow," like it was a promise, not a question. But more than English, I learned something about people. That the ones who save you aren't the ones with the big speeches or the grand gestures. They're the ones who show up. Who pour your coffee. Who call you Mija when you've forgotten what it feels like to have a mother. Rosa never asked for my story. But one night, about 3 months in, I told her anyway. All of it. The marriage. The move. The divorce. The loneliness. In broken English. With wrong tenses and missing articles and words I had to repeat 3 times. And when I finished, Rosa just nodded and said, "Bienvenida America, Mija." Welcome to America. Now eat your pancakes. They're getting cold. I ate them. Every last bite. What if pancakes cure heartbreak? Let me ask you a ridiculous question. Can a pancake cure a broken heart? Obviously not. That's stupid. Pancakes are flour, eggs, milk, and maybe a little vanilla if you're fancy. They don't have medical degrees. They don't prescribe antidepressants. They can't text your ex and tell him he's an idiot. But here's a less ridiculous question. Can a small, consistent, almost meaningless ritual remind your brain that you're still alive? Yes. Absolutely yes. And sometimes, that's the same thing as a cure. By the end of my 2nd month at the iron skillet, I had developed a routine. A stupid, beautiful, completely unremarkable routine. I would wake up around 2 p.m. I would feel the familiar weight of sadness on my chest, like a cat that refuses to move. I would tell myself I wasn't going to the diner tonight. And then, around 11 p.m., I would put on my shoes and go anyway. Every night, the same order. Pancakes. Coffee. A glass of water I never drank. Every night, the same booth, the one by the window. Where I could watch the empty street and pretend I was in a movie about someone whose life was about to get better. Every night, Rosa would bring the plate, pour the coffee, and say, "You okay, hon?" And every night, I would lie and say, "I'm fine." But something shifted around week 8. I can't pinpoint the exact night. It was gradual, like the seasons changing. One day you realize the trees aren't bare anymore, but you can't remember when the leaves came back. That's how it was with my heart. I looked up from my pancakes one night and realized I wasn't crying. I wasn't even sad. I was just neutral. And neutral, after months of despair, felt like winning an Olympic gold medal. That's when I started asking the question. What if pancakes cure heartbreak? Not literally. Metaphorically. What if the cure isn't one big dramatic thing, a new love, a sudden success, a magical epiphany? What if the cure is just showing up? Night after night. Fork after fork. Word after word. Here's the neuroscience, because I know you're curious. Your brain has a system called the habit circuitry. It lives in a part of your brain called the basal ganglia. This system doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care if you're happy or sad or completely destroyed. It only cares about repetition. When you do the same thing at the same time in the same place, your basal ganglia starts building a neural pathway. A little dirt road in your brain. And every time you repeat the behavior, that dirt road gets paved. Then widened. Then turned into a highway. After about 8 weeks of diner visits, my brain had built a pancake highway. The act of walking to the diner, pushing open the door, sitting in the booth, it had become automatic. I didn't have to convince myself anymore. I just did it. And that automaticity, that lack of resistance, was the first crack in the wall of my depression. Because here's the secret about healing. You don't heal by feeling better. You heal by doing things until the feelings catch up. Action first. Emotion second. Always. I learned this from a psychology paper I found on my phone at 3 a.m., hiding in the bathroom so the light wouldn't wake up my sleeping neighbors. The paper was about behavioral activation. It's a treatment for depression that sounds almost too simple to work. Instead of waiting until you feel motivated to do something, you do something first, anything, and the motivation follows. Like pushing a dead car. The first push is the hardest. But once the wheels start rolling, the car gets easier to move. My pancake ritual was my dead car. Every night, I pushed. Every night, the wheels rolled a little easier. But here's where the English learning comes in. Because while I was doing this ritual, something unexpected was happening to my language skills. I stopped translating in my head. You know what I mean, when someone says something in English, and you hear it, and your brain converts it to your native language. Then you think of a response in your native language, then you convert that back to English. Exhausting. Slow. Humiliating. That process started to fade. Not because I studied. Because my brain finally relaxed. The diner had become safe. Rosa had become safe. The pancakes had become safe. And when your brain feels safe, it stops using the translation detour and starts using the direct path. You hear English. You understand English. You answer in English. No middleman. No delay. It happened for the first time on a Tuesday night. Rosa asked, "You want whipped cream on those pancakes today?" And without thinking, I said, "Yes, please." 2 words. Simple. Automatic. I didn't plan them. I didn't translate them. They just came out. Like they had always been there, waiting for the door to open. I almost choked on my coffee. Did I just speak? Without panicking? Without rehearsing? Rosa didn't notice anything special. She just nodded and wrote whip on her little notepad. But I sat there, stunned, holding my coffee mug like it was a trophy. That was the moment I understood. The pancakes weren't curing my heartbreak. They were creating a container, a safe, predictable, boring container, where my brain could finally stop fighting and start learning. The cure wasn't the food. The cure was the repetition. The cure was the safety. The cure was Rosa's patient smile and the buzzing fluorescent lights and the sticky salt shaker that never got cleaned. So no, pancakes don't cure heartbreak. But rituals do. Showing up does. Doing the same small thing every day until your brain stops screaming and starts whispering, that's the cure. And if that small thing happens to involve maple syrup and a waitress who calls you Mija? Even better. I finished my pancakes that night. All 3 of them. With whipped cream. Rosa came by to clear the plate and raised her eyebrows. Finally, she said. Took you long enough. I laughed. Actually laughed. And for the first time in months, I believed that maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay. Learning English one order at a time. Here's something nobody tells you about learning English in America. The best classroom isn't a classroom. It's a diner. It's the place where people shout order up, and more coffee, and you want that to go? It's where language is messy, fast, and full of contractions that textbooks pretend don't exist. Gonna instead of going to. Wanna instead of want to. Dunno instead of I don't know. Real English. Ugly English. Beautiful English. And I was drowning in it. But slowly, pancake by pancake, I started to swim. The menu became my first textbook. Not because I studied it. Because I had no choice. Every night, Rosa would ask, same thing, hon? And every night, I would nod. But one night, I got brave. I looked at the menu, really looked at it, and I noticed something. The dishes had names that told stories. The farmer's breakfast came with eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast. The lumberjack was the same thing but with twice the portions. The skinny special was egg whites and turkey sausage. Each name painted a picture. Each name taught me something about American culture. Farmers wake up early and need big breakfasts. Lumberjacks are even hungrier. Skinny means healthy, or at least pretending to be. I wasn't just learning words. I was learning a way of thinking. A way of categorizing the world. The real breakthrough happened around week 10. Rosa was busy, the diner was unusually full, some kind of trucker convention, so she couldn't sit with me. I was alone in my booth, sipping coffee, when the couple in the next booth started talking. The married ones who shared apple pie every Friday. Except it wasn't Friday. It was Wednesday. And they weren't sharing pie. They were arguing. Not a loud argument. A quiet, tense, I'm disappointed in you argument. The wife said, I told you 3 times to pick up the dry cleaning. The husband said, I forgot. I'm sorry. The wife said, you're always sorry. And then silence. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But the booths were close. The walls were thin. And I realized, halfway through their conversation, that I understood every word. Not just the vocabulary. The subtext. The exhaustion. The quiet resignation of a marriage that had stopped trying. I understood it because I had lived it. Language isn't just grammar. It's emotion. And once you've felt an emotion, you can recognize it in any language. That's the secret to accelerated language learning, by the way. Emotional anchoring. When you connect a new word to a strong feeling, heartbreak, hope, loneliness, joy, your brain tags it as important. The hippocampus, your memory center, prioritizes emotional information. It's an evolutionary thing. Your ancestors needed to remember which berries made them sick and which animals tried to eat them. Strong feelings equals survival relevance. So when you learn "I forgot, I'm sorry" while eavesdropping on a failing marriage, you never forget it. Your brain thinks it might save your life someday. That night, I went home and wrote down every phrase I had overheard. Not in a fancy notebook. On a napkin I stole from the diner. Pick up the dry cleaning. I forgot. I'm sorry. You're always sorry. I said them out loud in my empty apartment. I said them until they stopped feeling foreign. I said them until they became mine. The next night, I tested myself. Rosa came by and asked, "You need anything else, hon?" And instead of nodding, I said, "Can I have more coffee, please?" 5 words. Perfectly understandable. No panic. No translation. Rosa poured the coffee and said, "See? You're learning." And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. From that night on, I made a game out of it. Every night, I would learn one new phrase from the diner. Not from a textbook. From real life. From the truck driver who always said hit the road when he left. From the college student who told her friend, "I'm so done with this semester." From the old man who muttered "another day, another dollar" every time he paid his bill. I started a list on my phone. Hit the road means leave. I'm so done with means exhausted or frustrated. Another day, another dollar means life is ordinary but you keep going. These weren't phrases from an ESL workbook. They were phrases from American souls. And learning them felt like being let in on a secret. Here's what most language learners get wrong. They focus on correct English. But correct English doesn't exist. Not really. There's formal English, which nobody speaks in a diner at 2 a.m. And there's real English, which is full of fragments, slang, and sentences that end with prepositions. Real English is what Rosa speaks. What the truck drivers speak. What the tired married couple speaks. So I stopped trying to be correct. I started trying to be understood. And that shift, from perfection to connection, changed everything. One night, a new customer sat at the counter. A young guy, maybe 22, with a hoodie and a backpack. He ordered coffee and stared at his phone. Then his phone rang. He answered. And I heard him say, "Yeah, I know. I messed up. Can we just start over?" Start over. 2 words. Such simple words. But they hit me like a truck. Because that's what I was doing. Starting over. Not just in English. In life. In love. In everything. I looked at my pancakes. I looked at Rosa. I looked at the young guy with the hoodie, who was now crying quietly into his coffee. And I thought, we're all the same. Every single person in this diner at 2 a.m. is just someone who messed up and wants to start over. That night, I didn't just learn English. I learned something about America. This country is full of people who started over. Immigrants. Divorcees. College dropouts. Recovering addicts. People who failed and got back up. People who showed up at a diner at 2 a.m. because they had nowhere else to go. And the language they speak, broken, messy, beautiful, is the language of second chances. Rosa came to clear my plate. "You're smiling," she said. "I'm smiling," I agreed. "First time," she said. "Not the last," I said. And I meant it. A love that started with maple syrup. I wasn't looking for love. Let me be very clear about that. I was looking for pancakes. I was looking for Rosa's coffee and the buzzing fluorescent lights and the quiet safety of a booth where nobody expected me to be okay. Love was the last thing on my mind. Love had already punched me in the face, stolen my wallet, and moved to Ohio. I was done with love. But love, as it turns out, wasn't done with me. It was a Thursday night. Or maybe Friday. The days had started blurring together again, but in a good way, not the blur of depression, but the blur of routine. I was in my usual booth, halfway through my pancakes, yes, I was finally eating them, when the bell on the door jingled. I didn't look up. I never looked up. New customers came and went. Truckers. Night owls. The occasional cop grabbing a late coffee. But this time, something was different. The person who walked in didn't head for the counter or the booths in the back. He stopped. He looked around. And then he walked directly to the booth across from mine, not next to me, not far away, and sat down. I could see him perfectly from my peripheral vision. Tall. Messy brown hair. A worn leather jacket that had seen better decades. He looked tired in that specific way that artists and insomniacs look tired. Like he hadn't slept in years but was still somehow awake. Rosa came over. "What can I get you, hon?" He didn't look at the menu. "Pancakes," he said. "And coffee." "Black." I almost choked. Pancakes. At 2 a.m. Another pancake person. I stole a glance at him. He was staring out the window at the empty street, his jaw tight, his hands wrapped around the menu like it was a lifeline. He had the same look I had worn for months. The look of someone who had been broken and was still trying to figure out which pieces went where. Rosa brought his coffee. He drank it black, no sugar, no cream. The kind of coffee order that says I don't want to enjoy this. I just want to survive it. I knew that order. I had lived that order. He got his pancakes. And then he did something that made my heart clench. He stared at them. Just stared. The same way I had stared at mine for weeks. His fork hovered. His shoulders slumped. And then, very quietly, he said, "I can't." Not to me. To himself. To the universe. To the plate of pancakes that had become a mirror. Rosa appeared beside him. "You can," she said. "One bite. That's all. Just one." He looked up at her, and I saw his eyes were wet. Not crying. Just wet. The way eyes get when you're fighting tears and losing. He picked up his fork. He took one bite. He chewed. He swallowed. And then he took another. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe because I recognized myself in him. Maybe because Rosa had taught me that the best way to heal is to help someone else heal. Maybe because I was lonely and he was lonely and loneliness recognizes loneliness like a secret handshake. I slid out of my booth. I walked over to his table. I sat down across from him without asking. And I said, the first time I came here, I cried into my pancakes for an hour. Rosa didn't say a word. She just poured more coffee. He looked at me. Confused. Embarrassed. But also, relieved. Like he had been holding his breath underwater and someone finally threw him a rope. How do you know Rosa? He asked. Everyone knows Rosa, I said. She's the patron saint of 2 a.m. He laughed. It was a small laugh, barely a sound, but it was real. I'm Leo, he said. Hi, Leo, I said. I'm the woman who orders pancakes every night and never finishes them. Neither do I, he said, looking down at his plate. And just like that, a friendship began. Not the kind with fireworks and dramatic music. The slow kind. The kind that starts with silence and grows like a plant you almost forget to water. Leo was an architect. Or he had been. He lost his job 6 months ago when his firm downsized. Then his girlfriend left. Then his landlord raised the rent. He was sleeping on his friend's couch, applying for jobs that never called back, and eating pancakes at 2 a.m. because it was cheaper than therapy. He was me, but with better hair and a worse jacket. We didn't talk much that first night. We just ate our pancakes. Together. In silence. But it was a comfortable silence. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. The next night, he was there again. Same booth. Same pancakes. Same black coffee. I sat down without asking. He didn't object. Back again? I said. Back again, he said. You? Pancakes don't eat themselves. He smiled. A real smile this time. Small, crooked, but real. No, he said. They don't. That was the beginning. Night after night, we met at the diner. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. I told him about my divorce, my move, my broken English. He told me about his failed career, his ex-girlfriend who took the dog, his fear that he would never be successful again. We were two broken people, sitting in a broken diner, eating broken pancakes. But somehow, together, we were less broken. Here's the science of second chances. Your brain has something called social buffering. When you're stressed or heartbroken, being around another person, even a stranger, reduces your cortisol levels. That's the stress hormone. It drops just from shared presence. You don't need to talk. You don't need to solve each other's problems. You just need to be there. Together. In the same space, at the same time, eating the same sad pancakes. Leo became my social buffer. And I became his. We didn't fix each other. But we held space for each other. And sometimes, that's the same thing. One night, about 3 weeks into our pancake friendship, Leo looked at me across the table and said, "Your English is getting really good." I blinked. Really? Really? When we first met, you spoke in fragments. Now you speak in sentences. Full ones. With verbs and everything. I laughed. Rosa taught me. Rosa taught both of us, he said. And then, quieter, but you taught me something too. What? He hesitated. Then he reached across the table and touched my hand. Just a touch. Brief. Light. Like he was testing whether I was real. You taught me that starting over isn't shameful, he said. It's just, starting over. That's all. I didn't pull my hand away. I didn't say anything. I just let it rest there, under his, while the jukebox played an old song and Rosa pretended not to notice. And that's how a love that started with maple syrup began. Not with a bang. Not with a grand gesture. With pancakes. With silence. With two people who had given up on love, accidentally finding it in a 24-hour diner at 2 a.m. Culture shocks and quiet compromises. Dating an American is weird. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in a why do you people put ice in everything and hug strangers like they're family kind of way. Leo was wonderful. Kind. Patient. He never made fun of my accent, never rushed me when I searched for a word, never laughed when I accidentally said I'm boring instead of I'm bored. But he was also American. And being American meant he had a completely different operating system for love. Let me give you an example. In my culture, you don't say I love you until you're practically engaged. You show love through actions, cooking, cleaning, remembering birthdays, sacrificing. Words are cheap. Actions are expensive. Leo, on the other hand, said I love you on our third real date. Third. I nearly choked on my pancake. I'm sorry, what? I said. I love you, he repeated. Like it was nothing. Like he was ordering coffee. You can't say that, I said. We've only been to the diner together 12 times. He looked confused. But I feel it. Why shouldn't I say it? That was my first culture shock. Americans are direct. Painfully direct. They say what they feel, when they feel it, without waiting for the right time or the right amount of proof. In my culture, you wait. You test. You make sure the other person is serious before you risk embarrassment. But Leo wasn't embarrassed. He was just honest. And honesty, as it turns out, is terrifying when you're not used to it. Here's the psychology behind this. Different cultures have different display rules for emotion. Display rules are the unwritten social guidelines about when, where, and how you can express feelings. Some cultures are high context, you communicate indirectly, reading between the lines. Assuming the other person will understand without you having to spell everything out. Other cultures are low context, you say exactly what you mean, directly, no subtext required. My culture was high context. Leo's was low context. And we were speaking English, which is a naturally low context language. That meant I was constantly overthinking and Leo was constantly underthinking. I would say I'm fine when I wasn't fine, expecting him to read my face, my tone, my slumped shoulders. And he would say okay, great. And go back to his pancakes, completely missing the crisis. The first time we fought, it was about nothing. Literally nothing. He forgot to text me back for 4 hours. In my culture, that meant he was angry, or losing interest, or seeing someone else. In his culture, it meant he was busy. That's it. Just busy. I sulked for an entire evening. He had no idea. When he finally asked what was wrong, I said nothing, which, of course, he believed. Because in low-context America, nothing means nothing. Not nothing, but please keep asking until I tell you. Just, nothing. We didn't resolve that fight. We just sat in awkward silence until Rosa came over and said, "You two need to use your words." And she was right. I needed to learn a new language for conflict. Not English. Honesty. That was the real lesson of cross-cultural love. It's not about learning vocabulary. It's about learning vulnerability. Leo taught me that saying I'm hurt doesn't make you weak. It makes you clear. And clarity is kindness, not cruelty. So I started practicing. Small things at first. I didn't like it when you said that. I need you to call me before midnight. I'm not fine. I'm sad. Every sentence felt like jumping off a cliff. But Leo never punished me for my honesty. He just said, okay, I hear you, and adjusted. Like it was normal. Like that's what people in healthy relationships do. Meanwhile, I was teaching him my culture too. The importance of silence. The meaning behind a shared meal. The way love is sometimes shown by doing dishes instead of saying sweet things. He struggled at first. Why don't you just tell me what you need, he would ask. And I would say, because if I have to tell you, it doesn't count. That drove him crazy. But over time, he learned to watch. To notice. To see the small things, the way I made his coffee without asking, the way I folded his jacket when he left it on the booth. The way I remembered that he liked his pancakes with blueberries, not chocolate chips. Those were my love words. Quiet. Unspoken. But real. Here's what I discovered about American culture through Leo. Americans are not shallow. They're just efficient. They don't see the point in guessing games. If you love someone, you say it. If you're angry, you say that too. It's not about being rude. It's about saving time. Because life is short, and diners close at 2 a.m., oh wait, they don't. But you get the idea. The biggest compromise we made was about space. In my culture, couples do everything together. Shopping. Eating. Watching TV. Even sleeping, separate beds were considered a bad sign. But Leo needed alone time. Real alone time. Hours where he didn't talk to anyone, including me. At first, I took it personally. I thought he was pulling away. But Rosa explained it to me one night when Leo was late. It's not you, Mija, she said. Americans are weird about independence. They need to feel like they chose you, not that they fell into you. Give him space. He'll come back. He always comes back. She was right. Leo always came back. And when he came back, he was more present, more loving, more himself. I learned that giving someone space isn't rejection. It's respect. And respect, in any language, is the foundation of love. By the end of our first year together, we had built our own language. Not English. Not my native language. A hybrid. A Creole of directness and subtlety, of words and silences, of pancake dates and quiet mornings. We still misunderstood each other sometimes. We still fought about stupid things. But we also learned to say I'm sorry in a way that actually meant something. One night, sitting in our usual booth, Leo looked at me and said, "You know what I love about you?" "What?" "You try. Every day. Even when it's hard. Even when you're tired. You just keep trying." I started to say something modest, something self-deprecating, something from my culture that deflects praise. But I stopped. I took a breath. And I said, "Thank you. I love that you notice." He smiled. Rosa, passing by with a coffee pot, winked. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just learning English anymore. I was learning a new way to love. And it was working. Building a home, not just a house. Leo proposed at the diner. Of course he did. Where else? It was 1 a.m. on a Tuesday. Rosa had just brought us our usual, pancakes for both, black coffee for him, something with too much cream for me. He didn't get down on one knee. He didn't pull out a ring box. He just looked at me across the table, syrup on his chin, and said, "I don't want to eat pancakes with anyone else for the rest of my life. Marry me." I laughed. Then I cried. Then I said yes. Rosa saw the whole thing from behind the counter. She didn't clap or cheer. She just nodded, poured us both more coffee, and said, "About time." We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony. City Hall. Rosa was our witness. Leo wore the same leather jacket. I couldn't get him to buy a suit, and I wore a white dress I found at a thrift store for $12. It was perfect. Not fancy. Not Instagrammable. Just us, a judge, and Rosa crying harder than anyone. The first year of marriage was easy. We were still in the honeymoon phase, still high on the miracle of finding each other in a 2 a.m. diner. We went to the diner every night, not because we were sad anymore, but because it was ours. Rosa started calling us the pancake people. She gave us a discount. She refused to take tips. "Save your money for babies," she said. We didn't plan to have kids right away. But life, as usual, had other plans. 2 years into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified. Not because I didn't want children, I did. Because I didn't know how to be a mother in a country that wasn't mine, in a language that still tripped me up. In a culture that expected me to be perfect. What if my child was embarrassed by my accent? What if I couldn't help with homework? What if I passed on my broken English like a hereditary disease? Leo held my hand. "You're not broken," he said. "You're bilingual. And our kid is going to be bilingual too. That's not a problem. That's a superpower." He was right. But knowing something in your head and feeling it in your heart are two different things. Our son was born on a rainy Tuesday in March. We named him Mateo, after Rosa's father, who had passed away the year before. Rosa cried again. She cried so hard the nurses thought she was the grandmother. She wasn't. She was just Rosa. The woman who had saved my life with coffee and patience and the occasional stern lecture. The first few months were chaos. Sleep deprivation. Diaper explosions. The kind of exhaustion that makes you forget your own name. I stopped going to the diner. Not because I didn't want to, because I couldn't. Newborns don't care about your rituals. They care about milk and sleep and being held. Everything else is optional. But here's what happened during those sleepless nights. I started talking to Mateo in English. Not because I was fluent. Because I wanted him to learn. And in talking to him, I realized something strange. I wasn't afraid anymore. When you're speaking to a baby, you can't be afraid. Babies don't judge your grammar. They don't care about your accent. They just want your voice, any voice, as long as it's warm. So I talked. I narrated everything. "Mommy is changing your diaper. It's a dirty diaper. Very dirty. Yes, yes, very dirty." I sang songs with wrong lyrics. I read board books in English that I barely understood myself. And slowly, without pressure, without exams, without shame, my English got better. Not because I studied. Because I had to. Because a tiny human was watching me, listening to me, learning from me. And I refused to let him down. Leo noticed. "Your accent is fading," he said one night. It is? Yeah. You sound American. Almost. I punched his arm. Almost? Almost, he said, grinning. Give it another 10 years. When Mateo started talking, he spoke a mix of English and my native language. He would say, I want agua, instead of I want water. He would count 1, 2, tres. His preschool teachers thought it was adorable. I thought it was normal. Because that's what bilingual families sound like. We're not confused. We're just efficient. We use whichever word is closer. Then came our daughter, Lucia. She was born 2 years after Mateo. Louder. Fiercer. More stubborn. She refused to speak anything but English from the moment she could form sentences. Mom, you say it wrong, she would tell me. It's spaghetti, not paschetti. I wanted to be offended. But she was right. And she was helping. She just didn't know it. Having children changed my relationship with English in a way I never expected. Before kids, English was a tool. Something I used to survive. After kids, English became a home. Something I lived in. Something I decorated with my own mistakes and triumphs and inside jokes. Mateo still teases me about the time I said I'm so horny instead of I'm so lonely at a parent-teacher conference. Different word. Very different meaning. The teacher's face was unforgettable. But that's okay. Those mistakes are ours now. They're family stories. They're proof that we're real. Here's the science of language and parenthood. When you speak to your children in a second language, your brain activates something called parental neural synchrony. Your brain waves actually align with your child's. You become more attuned, more patient, more creative with words. You stop worrying about perfection because perfection isn't the goal. Connection is the goal. And connection, as it turns out, is the best language teacher there is. Tonight, we went back to the diner. All 4 of us. Leo, me, Mateo, now 6, and Lucia, now 4. Rosa is still there. Grayer. Slower. But still pouring coffee, still calling everyone Han, still pretending not to notice when Mateo spills syrup on the floor. The kids ordered chocolate chip pancakes. Leo ordered his usual. I ordered mine. And as I sat there, watching my family eat breakfast at 2 a.m., because that's what we do, that's who we are, I realized something. I wasn't a stranger anymore. I wasn't broken. I wasn't the woman who cried into her pancakes 6 years ago. I was a wife. A mother. A friend. A regular at a diner that never closes. I was home. Not the country I was born in. Not the country I moved to. A home I built, word by word, pancake by pancake, mistake by beautiful mistake. And it was good. The same diner, 10 years later. 10 years. That's how long it's been since I first walked into the iron skillet, frozen and broken and unable to eat a plate of pancakes. 10 years of late nights, early mornings, spilled coffee, and Rosa's voice saying you okay, Han? 10 years of learning English, losing love, finding love, building a family, and becoming someone I never thought I could be. Tonight, I'm back. Same booth. Same cracked white plate. Same flickering eat sign outside that's missing 2 letters. But everything else is different. I'm different. Leo is next to me, scrolling through his phone, looking for a new construction project. He got his architecture license back 5 years ago. Now he runs his own small firm. He designs libraries and community centers, buildings that matter. He still wears that stupid leather jacket, even though it's falling apart. I bought him a new one for his birthday. He never wears it. This one has history, he says. He's not wrong. Mateo is across from me, trying to build a tower out of sugar packets. He's 10 now. Tall. Serious. He got my eyes and Leo's stubbornness. He speaks English with an American accent that I will never have, and he also speaks my native language with an accent that makes my mother laugh. He's the best of both of us. Last week, he corrected my pronunciation of library. I wanted to be annoyed. Instead, I felt proud. Lucia is 8. She's the one who ordered the chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream and sprinkles, because sprinkles are non-negotiable. According to her. She's already planning her birthday party, which is 6 months away. She got Leo's confidence and my tendency to cry at commercials. She's fierce and loud and exactly the kind of woman I hope she stays. And Rosa. Rosa is behind the counter, same as always. Her hair is completely gray now. Her knees bother her on cold days. But her eyes are the same, kind, tired, knowing. She's training a new waitress, a young woman named Destiny who just moved here from Honduras. Rosa is teaching her the ropes. Don't rush them, I hear her say. Let them take their time. Everybody's got a story. I look around the diner. The jukebox is still there, still playing songs from the 80s. The vinyl booths have been reupholstered, same bruised banana color, but no more tears. The coffee machine is new. The menu has changed. But the feeling hasn't. The feeling of being in a place where nobody expects you to be anything other than what you are. Here's what 10 years feels like. It feels like walking into a room where you once fell apart and realizing that you're not afraid of that room anymore. It feels like looking at a plate of pancakes and seeing food, not a mirror. It feels like hearing Rosa say same thing, hon? And realizing that you're not the same thing. You're better. Mateo knocks over his sugar tower. Lucia laughs. Leo helps him rebuild. And I sit there, watching them, thinking about the woman I used to be. The woman who couldn't swallow. The woman who cried into her breakfast. The woman who thought her English would never be good enough, her heart would never heal, her life would never make sense again. I want to go back in time and tell her something. I want to sit across from her in this booth, the old her, the broken her, and say, you're going to be okay. Not because life gets easier. Because you get stronger. And also because you're going to meet a waitress named Rosa and a man named Leo and 2 tiny humans who will teach you more about love than any marriage ever could. But I can't go back in time. None of us can. What I can do is sit here, in this booth, with these people, and feel grateful. Not for the heartbreak. Not for the divorce. But for the diner. For the pancakes. For the 2 a.m. nights when I had nothing and somehow, impossibly, found everything. Rosa comes over to our table. She's holding a coffee pot, same as always. Refill, hon, she asks. Yes, please, I say. She pours. Then she looks at Leo, then at the kids, then back at me. You did good, Mija, she says. Quiet. Just for me. You did too, Rosa, I say. You did too. She nods. Blinks a few times. Then she goes back to the counter, because that's what Rosa does. She serves coffee. She holds space. She saves lives, one cup at a time. The science of returning is real. Psychologists call it autobiographical memory reconstruction. When you revisit a place that holds strong emotional memories, good or bad, your brain doesn't just remember. It reconsolidates. It updates the memory with new information, new feelings, new context. That's why returning to the diner tonight feels different. My brain isn't just replaying the past. It's rewriting it. It's saying, that was then. This is now. You survived. You thrived. You're not the same person, and that's not a loss. That's a victory. I finish my pancakes. All of them. No tears. No struggle. Just the quiet satisfaction of a meal eaten with people you love, in a place that once held your darkest hours. Leo reaches under the table and squeezes my hand. You okay? He asks. I look at him. At his messy hair. At his worn leather jacket. At the man who said I love you on the third date and meant it. I'm more than okay, I say. I'm home. Mateo looks up from his new sugar tower. Mom, can we come here every night? I laugh. Not every night, baby. But whenever you need to. Lucia, mouth full of whipped cream, mumbles something that sounds like best diner ever. It is, baby. It really is. The bell on the door jingles. A new customer walks in. Young. Alone. Tired eyes. He sits at the counter and stares at the menu like it's written in a foreign language. Rosa walks over. What can I get you, hon? He looks up. His lip trembles. Pancakes, he says. And coffee. Please. Rosa nods. She pours his coffee. She doesn't rush him. She doesn't ask questions. She just lets him be. And I smile, because I know. I know exactly where he is. And I know exactly where he's going. Your heartbreak is not the end. I want to tell you one more thing before we finish. It's the most important thing. The thing I wish someone had told me on that first night. When I was sitting alone in a diner with cold pancakes and a heart that felt like a crime scene. Your heartbreak is not the end of your story. I know it feels like it is. I know the pain is so loud that you can't hear anything else. I know you've replayed every conversation, every mistake, every what if until your brain feels like a scratched record. I know you've convinced yourself that you'll never love again, never speak English without an accent, never feel like you belong anywhere. But you're wrong. And I'm not saying that to be nice. I'm saying it because I lived it. Because I sat in that same darkness, in that same booth, and I came out the other side. Not because I'm special. Because I refuse to stop showing up. Here's the truth about healing. It's not linear. It's not a straight line from sad to happy. It's a mess. Some days you'll feel great. Some days you'll cry into your breakfast for no reason. Some days you'll want to give up and move back to your home country and pretend America never happened. That's normal. That's human. That's not failure. That's just the process. The only real failure is quitting. And quitting doesn't mean taking a break. It doesn't mean having a bad day. It means stopping completely. It means never walking back into that diner. It means letting the fear win. So don't let it win. Order the pancakes. Even if you can't eat them. Say the wrong word. Even if people laugh. Go back to the diner, the classroom, the conversation group, the language app, whatever your diner is, and just show up. Again and again and again. Until the showing up becomes a habit. Until the habit becomes a skill. Until the skill becomes a part of who you are. That's what I learned from Rosa, from Leo, from the pancakes, from the 2 a.m. fluorescent lights. Learning English isn't about memorizing vocabulary lists. It's about building a life where English matters. It's about finding your own iron skillet, your safe place, your patient teacher, your reason to keep trying. For me, it was a diner. For you, it might be something else. A coffee shop. A library. A park bench. An online community. A patient friend. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you keep going back. Because here's the secret that no textbook will ever tell you. Language is not a subject. It's a relationship. You don't master it. You marry it. You show up every day, even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when you'd rather do anything else. And over time, it stops being foreign. It stops being scary. It becomes yours. Imperfect. Messy. Beautiful. Yours. Tonight, as I sat in that booth with Leo and the kids and Rosa pouring coffee like she always has, I thought about all the people who will watch this video. All of you who are struggling. All of you who feel stuck. All of you who think your English will never be good enough, or your heart will never heal, or your life will never make sense. I want you to know something. I see you. I was you. And I'm telling you from the other side, it gets better. Not because the world changes. Because you change. Because you keep walking into the diner. Because you keep ordering pancakes. Because you keep trying, even when trying feels pointless. And one day, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but one day, you'll look up from your plate and realize you're not crying anymore. You're eating. You're laughing. You're speaking. You're living. And you'll wonder when exactly it happened. You won't be able to pinpoint the day. But you'll know it was worth every single hard night. So here's my challenge to you. Find your diner. Go there tomorrow. Or tonight. Or whenever you're ready. Order something. Say something. Even if it's just hello. Even if your voice shakes. Even if you get it wrong. Just start. Because starting is the hardest part. And once you start, the rest is just showing up. Rosa once told me something I'll never forget. She said, Mija, you don't have to be fluent to be heard. You just have to be brave enough to open your mouth. That's it. That's the whole thing. Bravery, not fluency. Courage, not perfection. Showing up, not showing off. You have everything you need already inside you. The words will come. The healing will come. The love will come. But first, you have to sit down at the table. You have to pick up the fork. You have to take the first bite. I believe in you. Rosa believes in you. And somewhere out there, in a 24-hour diner that never closes, a waitress is pouring coffee for someone who needs it. Maybe that someone is you. So go. Order the pancakes. Cry if you need to. Stay as long as you want. And when you're ready, start again tomorrow. Because the diner is always open. And so is your story. Wait. Before you click away, I need to tell you something I haven't told anyone else. Remember the young man who walked into the diner at the end of my story? The one with tired eyes who ordered pancakes and coffee? I lied to you. He wasn't a stranger. I knew him. I knew him because he was me. Not literally. But he was every version of me that ever walked into a place of brokenness and hoped no one would notice. Here's what I didn't say in the story. That young man? He comes back every single night now. He sits at the counter. He talks to Rosa. His English is getting better. And last week, he smiled for the first time. A real smile. Why am I telling you this? Because his story isn't over. And neither is mine. And neither is yours. You see, this channel isn't really about pancakes or diners or 2 a.m. confessions. It's about what happens after the heartbreak. The quiet, unglamorous, beautiful process of rebuilding. Word by word. Day by day. Pancake by pancake. I've been documenting my real English journey for months. The mistakes. The breakthroughs. The moments I wanted to quit. The moments I didn't. But I've only told you one story. There are dozens more. Stories about raising bilingual kids in America. Stories about cultural landmines I never saw coming. Stories about the time I accidentally told my mother-in-law something unforgettably wrong in English. Those stories are coming. But only if you're here to watch them. So here's my ask. Don't just subscribe. Turn on the bell. Because the next video? It's about the one word in English that almost destroyed my marriage. And trust me, you don't want to miss that. The diner never closes. And neither does this channel. See you in the next story. Subscribe now. Hit the bell. Your next English lesson is hiding inside a story you won't believe. Then proceed to the final required lines. That's all for today. I'll make more similar videos in the future. Please subscribe to watch them.